and welcome. Welcome to the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show, hosted by me, yours truly, Jeffrey Bellomo, where we discuss all things estate planning and elder law. And, well, hey, anything else we want to talk about. Now, today is going to talk specifically about estate planning and elder law, and probably fundamentally one of the most basic concepts and thoughts that you can have in estate planning, which is we never know when it's our time. And what should we do to be prepared for it? So we are going to talk about that today in light of the recent California fires and other natural disasters, as well as some horrific transportation incidents. And it just got me thinking. I've been receiving a lot of questions from our existing clients about lessons learned. And I thought, you know what? We'll go ahead and talk about it in the podcast and really just kind of take a few minutes and discuss some of the things from it that have come from it. So I do want to remind my listeners that at Bellomo Associates, we educate so that what happened to my family does not happen to yours. And we offer free educational workshops on a weekly basis. We have those workshops live in person in York as well as Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And we are offering workshops in the estate planning or pre-planning context, the crisis Medicaid planning, special needs planning, life care planning, as well as post-death administration, whether it be for probate administration or trust administration. We provide free educational workshops. We educate you. We explain what to be prepared for, what could happen, the pros, the cons, the goods, the bads, the uglies. And then you get to decide whether it's time or whether it's something that you need currently, or do you want to wait until another time. But either way, you are educated so that when it happens, you kind of know what to expect, you know what's going to happen, and have an opportunity to create a game plan with knowledge and information behind you. So please, if you're interested in any of our free educational workshops, reach out to us at 717-845-5390. As well as on the web at www.bellomoassociates.com, and that is B as in boy, ELLOMO. All right, awesome. Now, this is also my just standard podcast show disclaimer, which is please do not take what you hear from this show or any other show for that matter to constitute legal advice. If you are looking for legal advice pertaining to a specific situation, please contact an attorney licensed in the state that you reside in, who practices in the area that you are looking for advice in. And after you have met with them and received guidance based upon your specific factual situation, should you constitute that to be legal advice. Then and only then should you kind of take that advice specific to your situation. We will provide educational, informational, and entertainment purposes today, so that we can kind of give you some things to think about and, generally speaking, what that would look like. So, as I mentioned, I've really been thinking a lot lately, not only about how my mom passed away. She went to bed one evening and never woke up in the morning. And that had happened in 2015, December 28th of 2015. And so a lot of kind of the thoughts and education immediately after that was certainly around those types of thoughts and planning opportunities and making sure that things are in place. And lucky for our family, maybe because I practiced in this area, we certainly had things in order. My mother pre-planned. She had her funeral and all of her wishes documented. We knew what songs she wanted. We knew what casket she wanted. So I have done some other shows about that and sort of the benefit pertaining to it. I haven't done anything recently on that topic, which is probably a good thing, just simply meaning that nobody in my family has had a major catastrophic situation come up. But in the last month or so, we have had the California fires, and a lot of people lost their homes. A lot of people evacuated really within seconds of their homes being completely destroyed. And it has prompted a lot of questions from my clients about originals and what should be kept in the home. If they had to grab a go bag, what should be in the go bag? What happens if my office, if we hold the originals, if my office burned down, what happens? What should they be thinking about? What if that were to happen to them? And then we had the situation with a couple airplane crashes recently in the United States, which isn't something that historically we've really had much of that to really deal with. And of course, a bunch of questions started coming out of those as well from my clients in terms of, if that were to happen, are we taken care of? Are we good? Do we have in place what we need? Is there anything else you would be thinking about? Should we be having a family meeting? It's prompting a lot of questions around how to be prepared. So first things first, I personally believe that, planning, getting your thoughts in order, getting them down on paper, talking or relaying them to your family can never be done too soon. So that's just kind of first comment that I have. I don't think that we can ever be too prepared or plan too much ahead. I think that some people fear that if they do, then something will happen. And that is just not true. I think that probably the opposite probably happens more often than not, for sure, which is if you are properly planned, there's a good chance you won't need it. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with having everything in order. And I don't even necessarily mean legal documents. I'm talking pre-planning your funeral, getting that taken care of, discussing the casket, discussing the songs that you want at your funeral, post-funeral lunch, what do you want them to serve? Those are things that I remember vividly being very grateful for, that were already handled by my mom and dad. While we were dealing with a catastrophic situation in that she went to bed and didn't wake up in the morning, and at that point, cancer-free, healthy, doing really well, and to not have that extra burden on ourselves. And also, just in terms of knowing her wishes, certain items going to certain people, certain thoughts about items in the home. She had marked who she wanted to receive certain things. You cannot put a price tag on that information. And knowing that she had taken the time to really think that through. And of course, everybody wants to do what mom wants, or everybody wants to do what their family wants. Where the family disputes often come in is where it isn't clear. It wasn't relayed. It's not in writing. It wasn't on the back of a personal item with a name who was supposed to go to. The funerals weren't pre-planned. And that's when family members always want to do what the person intended and what they thought that they intended, which often leads to heartache. It often leads to disagreements among family members because everybody is striving to do what mom or dad wanted, right? That's their goal. But when two children or two family members have a different opinion on what they believe that person wanted, that's where you see these fights. That's where you see really a lot of animosity and disagreement among family members. But when it is in writing, when it is marked, when it's relayed to the family, especially when it's relayed to everybody at once, so everybody hears the same thing, it eliminates that stress. It eliminates that concern, and also eliminates the fighting later. It eliminates mom wanted, or she told me, or he told me. That is where we really find a lot of those fights. So regardless of whether it's, someone goes to bed and doesn't wake up, whether it's a car accident, a plane crash, any of those situations are all things that are certainly not planned. And they're certainly not something that you have the ability to say something right before or communicate something last minute. Some clients, some family members, have passed to cancer or other diseases, which, Alzheimer's, which sometimes takes time for the progression or for the person to actually succumb to it. And in those situations, although certainly not easier because, they're watching that occur over a period of time, and it can be very emotional because of how long it drags out, they do have the opportunity in those situations to say things, to explain things, to discuss things. Whereas with a sudden tragedy, that opportunity is not afforded to us. So we just want to make sure that we're prepared for that type of situation no matter what. As far as documents, I mean, one of the things that has really come up from my clients, and again, these are clients that are already working with us. They're already longstanding clients who are planned for, have the documents in place, getting updates on the documents. So maybe different from some of you who are listening today who are still trying to figure out what you need and what that would look like. For them, they have what they need, but their question, I think, also pertains to individuals who are thinking about doing it or who recently maybe did their estate planning. And the question becomes, where do we leave the documents? I've talked briefly about this on my podcasts, but more in terms of kind of where we keep them, why we keep them in the office. So in our law firm, we keep the originals here at the law firm. I spent a lot of money having the basement basically fit out so that we have a fire retardant, flood retardant room where we're housing the originals. And some clients have asked over the years, well, gee, Jeff, what happens if your building burns down? And one of the things that really stuck out to my clients and to me after they started asking me these questions, these fires in California, the heat was so intense that even the safety deposit boxes at banks were melting because the heat was so high. And so, of course, the clients are saying, well, if we have the originals at your office and it burns down, obviously, if the heat in the banks are too high for their type of vaults, clearly it's too much for yours. And yes, it would be. But here's the distinction. And here's something that I want to raise. So those of you can think about whether leaving them at another professional's location does make sense. Years ago, I had a client who his grandson actually really took care of him for several years. And the client was a little bit estranged from his children, including the parent or the mother of my client, or not my client, but the grandson. And my client really wanted to provide for his grandson because the grandson was the one who was visiting him, mowing his lawn, going to the grocery store for him, assisting him around the house, assisting him with his health needs. And his 3 children really didn't have much to do with him for the last, say, 5 years of his life. So he made a change with another law firm to update his documents. So he updates his documents. He provides for his grandson. All right. So now fast forward. His grandson is provided for in the documents. He has disinherited his children because of the fact that the grandson was the one providing care for him. Now, unfortunately, grandfather does eventually pass. Grandson hires our law firm to represent the estate, right? So we represent the estate of this gentleman. And I read the will provided for the grandson. The will noted about why he was disinheriting his 3 children and what that looked like and why he was doing it. So I said to the grandson, who was also appointed as the executor, personal representative of the estate, be sure that when we go to the courthouse to probate the estate, that you bring the original will. We'll need the original will to be able to do that. And he said, the attorney has it. So our office reached out to the attorney's office to get the original. And that's very common. I mean, that happens in a lot of situations. To which the law firm replied, we do not keep any originals of our documents. We provide them to the client. Okay, so now what that did was that put essentially the burden on the executor to produce the original. And if he could not produce the original, to prove what happened to the original document. So the law presumes that if the original document is not presented to probate, that the testator destroyed it. The testator revoked it. The testator got rid of it. And the burden shifted to us. So we knew a lot of information. We certainly knew that the daughter, the aunt of the son, who was the executor, was the former power of attorney before her powers were revoked and given to the grandson. She was also the former executrix before the grandfather revoked those powers as well. We are very confident that the aunt was in the home the day after the grandfather passed away and was seen walking out of the house with papers. Now, unfortunately, we were not able to prove that, to the burden that we had to prove it, to where it was determined that, yes, in fact, we could prove with 100% certainty that that document was destroyed. And unfortunately, the estate ended up going to the three children who were disinherited. Because that will was destroyed, it went back to the will prior, which gave equally to the three kids, and the aunt was the executrix. Now, that really got me thinking. That really got me processing what is the best way to handle the originals. And when I went out on my own, I immediately spent money on the basement and getting it fire retardant, flood retardant. We have a filing system in there very similar to libraries, where there are shelves that are all intertwined and they go in and out of each other so that you can get as much space as possible. And we since had to add another room because we were running out of space in the ones that we originally created. So certainly it was an investment. But what I realized in that moment was it was very difficult to prove what happened. Right? We have a good feeling we know what happened. We're pretty certain we know what happened. But the truth is, we don't know that for sure. Now, had those originals been placed at the professional's office, the professional would have then scanned those documents. There would be a letter that the client would have signed saying, please use ordinary care and caution in preserving these. I'm leaving the originals at your law firm. So then, if something were to happen and there was a fire in our office and all the documents burned, we would have, because all of the stuff is held off-site, it's scanned in the cloud off-site. So even if the original's burned, we would be able to bring a copy because we could show a document that said that they asked us to keep it. We could show proof that the building burned down. We could show that the documents were burnt, and therefore we'd be able to use a copy to probate or to carry out the wishes of whether it be the testator in the will or the grantor in the trust or whatever, because we could prove what happened. So in the instance of these California fires, clients are seeing these banks where originals were placed in some of these, and they're wondering, certainly you don't have that type of vault. No, I don't. But because we can prove what happened, we would still be able to carry those wishes out and be able to bring the copies of those documents. Now, I think it makes sense to have the professionals keep the originals. From the will standpoint, I think it makes a lot of sense because then you know where the original is, and even if something happens, it can be proven. But from the power of attorney standpoint, I don't want the person who is named to have the ability to make decisions before the person actually wants them to, right? You need to sign the power of attorney ahead of time so that before you lose capacity, you have signed it naming the person. But that does not mean that the person who is being named needs to sign the acknowledgement and actually have access to the original prior to when the person needs them to. So by keeping those originals at your professional's office, you know where they are, they're safeguarded, there's a situation in place so that they can get access to those in the moment. And then that way, you don't have to worry about something happening to the individual where they are put in a situation where they have to make a desperate decision, and sometimes they make poor decisions. So we're going to eliminate that concern. But the lesson learned from this situation is just thinking ahead, planning ahead for what happens if something catastrophic happens, whether it's the heart attack, the accident, the wildfires, the disasters. And that's happened in other parts of the country as well. I certainly truly believe that, living in fear is not at all what you want. You don't want to be fearful of traveling or getting in a car or getting in a plane or living in an area where there may be a wildfire or there may be a tornado or there may be an earthquake or there may be. The truth is, our lives are inherent with some risks and some things that could happen. And we have to live each day to the fullest, and we have to live each day, knowing that we are doing the best we can and that we're enjoying it and that we're planning the way that we can plan in case something like that happens. And I think that is what sort of came out of all of this for me is you're hearing a whole bunch of different stories about, young children or, moms or dads that were in the planes or houses that were lost. And it just gets you really realizing that, we're not guaranteed a certain number of years, but to the extent that you're the family that is left, having stuff in order, having your affairs documented so that there is no guesswork, so that we know who you want to raise the other children, or we know what your wishes are in regards to end of life or burial or cremation or certain personal property items. I would say a lot of planning is more about that stuff. And that stuff isn't necessarily something that you need a law firm for. It's more just putting that stuff in writing so that your family can go to bed knowing that what you want it to have happen is what's going to happen. That to me is what planning is really about. And you take all the necessary steps, you get everything in order, and then the question becomes, okay, Jeff, do we have kind of a family meeting? Do we have a meeting of the minds? That is definitely a personal preference. Personally, my personal answer would be yes. What I mentioned earlier is that I rarely find that people want to fight about what mom said or what mom put in writing or about what mom made her wishes clear to be. They fight more over if it wasn't, and they're fighting over what someone intended. So let's eliminate the what she intended and let's have everybody on the same page. Now, because I like to show both sides of everything, I will say that there's one client who is a dear friend of mine who did have a family meeting, who did discuss sort of the situation, end of life, funeral, showed where the funeral plans were, what the estate plan was, what the assets looked like, what they wanted to have happen. And then ultimately, the husband and wife were convinced that the relationship with their children changed after that because they knew how much money was there. And now the children started questioning vacation decisions, purchase decisions, because they wanted the money, because they knew how much was there. And now they changed their perspective to, okay, I'm named, so now I want to preserve it. And it's not yours until someone passes. So the heck with that. But, I don't necessarily think we should be sharing numbers or amounts at all. I think that we should just be sharing the plan so that all of the children are on the same page. That's the part that I think is more important. And, the husband acknowledged to me that he misunderstood. He thought that I was saying that we should disclose 100% of everything so that everybody was on the same page. And, that's a personal preference too. But for me, I don't think amounts matter because it's not, it's your money. You earned it, you worked for it, you do what you want to do with it, and hopefully you spend it. So I don't see the advantage to telling kids because then, they have a number in mind, but it could be 30 years later, it could be 50 years later, it could be, you could need long-term care, you could need significant care in the home. So I don't think amounts matter. I think it's more about the plan so that everybody's on the same page about wishes, desires, and wants. And I'd like to just sort of end this podcast. This is a tough one. Obviously, thinking about my mom going to bed and not waking up about 10 years ago, the families who lost loved ones at 9/11 or in the helicopter crash or in the California fires or in the plane crash recently, you can't plan for it. You don't know when it's going to happen. You don't know the day, the time, the moment. But what you can plan for is that something could happen. It could be the stroke. It could be the heart attack. It could be the transportation. It could be the car. It could be anything. And so what I would say is get your funerals planned. Give your family as much information as you can about those items, about what your wishes are, the personal property items, the sentimental items. If you have young children, where would they go? Who would raise them? Who would handle the money for them? Until what age? Keep those originals somewhere where they're safe, somewhere where we know where they are, in a professional's office, and, somewhere where there's a very clear understanding of where it is. And then if something happened, we're able to bring that document or a copy of that document to life after you're passed. Planning that stuff will give you the peace of mind to know that everybody around you will be taken care of. Again, a day doesn't go by that I don't thank my mom and my dad for planning ahead, for doing their funerals, for doing and planning the post-funeral lunch and the casket and the songs that they wanted and what would happen after death for my mom, going into a mausoleum and putting stickies on the back of personal property as to who would receive those items. You can't put a price tag on that. So go ahead and take a few minutes. And then once you do all that, have a conversation with the family about what you want and what your goals and wishes are. And then live your life. Know that you're planned for, know that you've done everything that you can, and live every day to the fullest. So I hope this was helpful. Definitely a change from a lot of the normal podcasts that we do. So thank you for allowing me to be vulnerable with you and to be here. Definitely not something we want to talk about, but by taking just a few moments, we can make it a little easier for those around us if something were to happen. So I want to thank you very much for joining us on the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show. This is Jeff Bellomo. Until next time, we'll see you real soon.